Okay, everyone, welcome to Elokus Podcast. This is class number 24 in this discourse Oteh or Kasalmo, which is the second discourse of the Shoshek Dimu 5672. We're holding in the middle of chapter 8. Probably going to be one more class after. No, this chapter goes to the end of the Maamor. Probably another 3 more classes. So let's see if we can conclude the discourse in class number 27. Any case, here we are, class number 24. So in yesterday, we were learning the main point that we're developing over here is that the root of the lights of Atzilus, all the lights, the various lights in Atzilus, the lights of all the spheroids, all the way from Chachma, all the way down to Malchus, from wisdom all the way down to kingship, with all the 8 spheros in between, all those lights, they're rooted in the light of the Kav, in the burst of light that Hashem blasts into the dark, empty space and empty void, which that blast of light is a light that comes from the Or Ein Sof, from the infinite light that precedes the Tzimtzum. So it is a re-entry of that light into, or an entry of that light, a reassertion of that light from outside the space of the void into the space of the void. In that sense, it is very much, the lights are very much a continuation of Or Ein Sof. And what he wants to prove according to that, where he's going with that, Be'ez Hashem, we're going to get there today already, is that for that reason, the lights in general are pshutim. Pshutim meaning they're simple, they don't have definitions, because there's nothing to define them, because they come from undefined territory. On the other hand, the vessels, the kelim, the vessels that there are in Atzilus, those vessels are very much defined. And that's because they originate in the Tzimtzum. And he explained it's a combination of the Tzimtzum and the Reshimu. If you remember, the Tzimtzum is the void, just the retraction of the Or, of the light, creating an emptiness. And once you have that emptiness, we can then detect Hashem's limited power that was once lost in Hashem's limitless power, because Hashem's power to limit is really, God's power to limit is really another facet of his limitlessness. And as long as the limitlessness was fully expressed as the original light that was revealed, you couldn't notice the power to limit. But once you hide the limitlessness, then you can detect the trace. That's what he calls it, the little trace of the lights of the Or Ein Sof, which is called the Reshimu. And that is really the source of makom, of space, which is really what later evolves into kelim, into vessels. So the lights are primarily a product of the original light, and the kelim are their primary source is the Tzimtzum and the Reshimu, which are all first cousins. Tzimtzum and Reshimu, or let's call them brothers. They're in the realm of constriction, contraction, and limitation. And that's for that reason, the vessels that come out are limited and defined. And where he's going to go with this is, therefore, he's going to explain that's why they're considered something new, because these limitations in their current form didn't exist at all higher. There was a power to limit, but these definitions of how the limitation takes form, that the limitation is a limitation of kindness, or the limitation is a limitation that of discipline, or the limitation is what is produced is something particular that did not exist at all. And that's why Atzilus is considered completely ein aroch. It doesn't have any comparison to what was before it. That is because of the kelim. But in as much as the lights are concerned, it's very much a continuation of what was before. Although, now this is important in this part of the discourse, is that although we're going to have to do a crossover over here, although the lights, he traces them up to the Or Ein Sof and tries to avoid the Tzimtzum, that the light is not a product of the Tzimtzum, yet it's obvious that the lights that are in Atzilus are very much impacted by the Tzimtzum. Their essence is not Tzimtzum. Their essence is Or, revelation. Because as he said yesterday, may a heder, from the non-beingness, from absence does not come revelation. And lights are all about revelation, and Tzimtzum is absence. However, the forms of lights that are in Atzilus are way, 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 way less potent and powerful and less infinite than the light when the light was in the kav, and even higher than that, obviously, when the light was pre-tzimtzum. So the tzimtzum definitely has a impact on diminishing the light. However, the substance of the light is not a tzimtzum product. On the other hand, the kalim, the vessels, we are originating them, we are tracing them into the tzimtzum. We have to understand that the lights also have a major role to play in the bringing about of the kalim, because without the light of the kav coming forth, nothing would have been. It's not like if God would not have reintroduced the light of the kav, eventually from the absence of light itself, from the tzimtzum itself, somehow it would evolve and eventually would come forth kalim. Okay, we wouldn't have any lights to light up the kalim, but we would have kalim, we would have vessels. Absolutely not. Everything that comes into being, into existence, comes into every force, every existence that exists in the entire Seder Shtalshlus, in the entire order of evolution, which is all post Tzimtzum, it is all produced by the light of the Kav. So, of course, even the Kalim are also produced by the Kav, and that's what he's going to address right now. That the Kav definitely does involve is responsible for the coming into existence of the kalim as well, of the vessels as well. However, it is not the essence of the keli. It's because without a force of production, without a revelation, without the maker making something, nothing could be made. So you need to have the introduction of the force of God, which is revelation, which is kav. The kav is revelation of Hashem's power. If tzimtzum is withdrawal of God's power. So in order for something to be, there needs to be a force bringing it into being. But what is the nature of what is a derivative of the constriction, of the limitations of the kalim. Let's read it inside. Again, v'savos hakalim b'poel, and the coming into being of the vessels in the literal sense. Hagam shozo gam kema hakav. Although the kav is also active in this, the kav is the line, that thread line, the beam of light that is shining into the void, into the hollow, into the round, empty, circular void. Sha'arei, because ayadei oirva hagili, through the light and revelation. Nishava came into existence, kol ishtalshlus, the entire revolution. In Ezeu, however, we have to realize it's not from the kav itself. It's really the tzimtzum that is producing it, and the way he receives it over here, it's the other side of the tzimtzum, the Reshimu. In Ezeu, the yislapshus hakav, it's because the kav, the beam of light, becomes enclosed b'nekudas Reshimu, in the point of the Reshimu. In other words, the kav itself can never produce vessels. The kav is so limitless; it's such a reflection of the Or Ein Sof that it doesn't have it within itself as a force of expression and revelation to produce particularizations. Because particularizations require restraint and restriction and holding back. And kav is the opposite of holding back. It's revelation. So what happens is, how does the kav, which is a force of revelation, bring about specified sphirot attributes? In this case, we say we're kalim vessels. That's because the kav, which is a force of revelation, is being funneled through the Reshimu. And remember what the Reshimu is. The Reshimu is God's hidden power to limit himself. So when you take the infinite light and you feed it through the Reshimu, the Reshimu, which again is the cousin of the Tzimtzum, or the brother of the Tzimtzum, the Reshimu, which is in the same family as the Tzimtzum, imparts its limitation onto the light. And then the effects of the light are going to be with limitation. In other words, light on its own, kav on its own, without the input, without the superimposed effect from the Reshimu, wouldn't produce no kalim. But since the light is now coming through the Reshimu, so the Reshimu is like adding It's adding effects onto the lights. And what's the effects? That the light should produce yellow, green, blue, purple, tall, short, soft, hard. In this case, intelligence, emotions, kindness, severity, particularizations. That is coming because the Reshimu is imparting that onto the light. Because only through this, that's how the kalim is produced from the light. So, and for that reason, we attribute the kalim primarily to the Reshimu and the Tzimtzum and not to the light. Zehu inyan, and this is to illustrate this and to say this strong and to explain this. He says we will see this from another idea which it says about the kalim. In Kabbalah, it says such an idea. It says that how do kalim come about? Again, how do you have the evolution of kalim, of vessels, from an otherwise non-vesseled God, from a God who's infinite and boundless and undefined? Suddenly definitions emerge. How did these kalim come about? So the Kabbalists were kind of tinkering with this. They were bothered with this. They were trying to figure this out. And one of their explanations was as follows: Masha mihisavu sa'or nasa hakeli. That's from the densification of the light comes about the vessels. The vessels are from the thickening of the light. So that means somehow light itself, in its elegance, in its pure state, is light. But somehow when light emerges, it begins to thicken. And the thickening of the light itself, because we understand light we can trace in God, because what's light? Light is, when we say light, we don't mean physical light. We mean an emanation of Him, a ray of Him. And that light is reflecting His infinity, like we discussed earlier. His infinity, His boundless. There's no question how light can come from Him. Question is how those vessels and containers and definitions come from an infinite, boundless God. So the answer to that is that somehow the Kabbalists want to explain it, that as the light continues to travel and kind of emerge, or at some point it starts to thicken, and in its thickening, eventually it thicks out to become kalim. It produces kalim. So what does that mean? How does light thicken? What is the concept over here? So he explains, Inyan is havos, and the idea of this thickening, the word his avos is from the word of, ayin beis, and actually it's the name of the sefer, ayin beis, but of means dense, so it's dense. Inyan is avos, ubchines hahagbola v'hametzios shabaor. The concept of the his avos, of the thickening of it, is the limitation and the substance of the light. Light really, see, the more spiritual something is, the more abstract it is, the less something it is. It's not defined. Definitions and constrictions make something be something. So a thing, thinginess, is definition and limitations and coarseness. Unthinginess is elegance, refinement, abstraction. So light on its own, the spirit, let's put it this way, it's almost like the spiritual side of light is not the thickness of the light. That's the refinement, that's the elegance of the light. The thickness of the light is that if light in any way becomes a substance of light, it becomes something. There is a something to that light. But how does light, which is supposed to be a reflection of the infinite source, how does it have a somethingness to it? Where does that happen? So he explains, Hagbola, the limitations, V'hametzios shabaor, and the somethingness of the light, Shabah, that comes, very important, al yedei davar achar, it comes through something else. In other words, if the light would be let alone and just allowing the light to flow or to shine freely as is, it would never thicken. But the thickening of the light is because the light is passing through something that thickens the light. And he gives an example for that. And by means of analogy, the letters that there is in any intellectual idea. Shakol inyan sichli, because every concept, every intellectual concept, every intelligent concept that Ayish by Oisi has letters. B'masha Yeslabish, in which the the concept encloses itself, and reveals itself. So we've discussed this already earlier, how there is a moment of epiphany, a moment of revelation, a moment of, and when your mind lights up with a new idea, with a new concept, you perceive a new concept, we call it brainstorming. So you brainstorm something and boom, there's so much light in your head. But then when you try to like grasp it and think about it, eventually at a certain point, you hear your mind talking. It has words. And what's the proof? When you say it, you're saying it in words. You're writing it down. You're writing it in words. So the words obviously don't begin when you're saying it. They begin first. You're thinking it in words. So the truth is, at the very, very onset, when the breakthrough happens, when the epiphany, when the brainstorm storms, and it comes flashing, at that moment you don't see letters. You just see brilliant light. The letters somehow emerge somewhere in the as this light settles into your mind. Suddenly, you don't have to work for it. You don't have to create the word. You're just like, I have this idea now. Let me go work and fetch out the words. Kind of come along with it. Yeah, if you want to teach it, sometimes you struggle to find the right words that ordinary people can hear, that can chew on. You want to find the right words, but to yourself, you don't have to like really, 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 really create the words. It almost happens. It happens automatically. But every idea comes with words, okay? With words, with letters that make up, and these letters are the vessels for the idea. It's the kalim, actually. There's the energy. Here you have the concept of light and vessels. The light is the concept itself, and then there is vessels to it. The vessels are the words. So interesting. Where do these? So these words are these kalim, are these vessels? Now, you start asking yourself, who produced these letters? Who produced these words? Where were the words? What's the source of the production of the words? So, in our experiences, in the intellectual process, usually as we are intellectually conceiving ideas, we are lost in the process that we can't be a side observer. We can't observe it from the as a bystander and actually watch it happen. Because if we're bystanding and watching it happen, then it's not happening for us. Like if you're self-conscious when it's happening and you're wondering how it's happening, then it's not happening. So you have to kind of be. So we on our own really would have never figured this exactly how this happens, to analyze the very process of the emergence of ideas. But this is what the great Hasidic masters did. Perhaps they were able to think two thoughts at the same time and have simultaneous experiences that they were able to. And once they taught it to us, we can be conscious of it. We can see that this is the way it really is that it happens together with the idea. The idea comes forth. Yes, in the beginning, you don't sense so much the letters. It's almost like the letters are coming from the intelligence itself. So that idea, hold it. If you stop over there, we're going to explain this more. But that idea that's from the thickening of the idea is the letters. Because the concept is the more the idea is the more spiritual side of the idea, and the letters are the more physical side of it. As the words, obviously, the words are more defined. The concept is not the right. There's the more spiritual element of it, which is the concept, and the more physical element, which is the words. So you see, just for a moment, what do you see already over here? You see there is an edelkeit, what we say, an elegance, a more ruchni, a more spiritual element of a concept, and then there is a more physical element, a more substance. The thinginess of it is the words. The non-thinginess of it is the idea. Okay? Now, but the question is, so that's the concept of the thick, but how did the thinginess get here? So that's the thickness of the idea produces the vessels, produces the words. But how does that happen? How does the thickness of an idea, if the idea is is a pure, refined, abstract, light, how does it produce? What's the thickness of it that produces the words? So the truth is, watch this. The truth is, and this is what he was saying earlier regarding, is that just like he said earlier, remember he said that the thickness of something and the existence of something is the effect that's happening to it from something else. It's being imparted upon it from an outside, which would mean something like this. He says like this: the intellect itself, the concept itself, doesn't have words in it. The concept is pure energy. There's no words in it. And it's the reason why in the beginning of an idea you don't see the words is no. I'm going off over here. So let's reverse a second. When the idea emerges, I'll probably stay truer to what he's saying if I read the next line inside, and then so I don't go off. So he says, let's read inside again. Let's go. When a concept emerges, what happens? Every intellectual idea has letters. When it reveals itself, what the concept encloses itself and reveals itself in. Now, in truth, even before you really feel the letters, and when do you feel it? When you grasp it, when you really understand the concept. In Kabbalistic, in Hasidic terminology, it's when it enters into your bina. That's when you really feel the letters, when you really can crunch it, right? You feel the words that are in it. So that's when you understand it. But the truth is, initially, when the idea emerges, it already has letters. There is always hidden letters in it. And then these letters become thickened and they become real letters to enclose the intellect. So what would mean is something like this. Whenever an idea emerges in the head, a new seichel pops into your mind, a new concept breaks through into your mind, there is light, and hidden in that light are hidden letters. You don't feel those letters. There's no such a thing of a revelation of any kind that comes without words. There's always words. But the blinding, remember we learned this concept earlier, that the brighter the light, you can't see the letters, you can't see. Kalim cannot come about because the light is too bright. That's what happens in the beginning. The letters are so subtle that you don't see these letters at all. They're lost in the light. As the light now thickens, why? Because it comes into your bina, and the light diminishes, not thickens, let's say. It diminishes because it goes now into the bina. The bina is not as bright. So now what happens is these subtle letters that were in the light become full-fledged words, and they become, now they're no more part of the idea, but rather they are vessels to hold the idea. Now you can already, it's almost like when the initial idea was there was a mixture of the letters and the light. And it's almost like the letters and the light were one. We'll see in a moment that it's coming from a different source. It's very important. Okay, this idea is very refined. So let's work with it slowly. But for all practical purpose, what we're speaking about now, initially the light and the vessels of the light are so one in the initial flash. There is letters there, but the letters are one with the light. The process of the light coming into your bina is that the vessels thicken, the light dims, the vessels become separated from the light, become more of a vessel, and that's why we can feel these vessels, we can hear these words, the words become more wordy, and now the words are a container for the vessel. So much so, how do you know it's a container? Because how many times do you say to yourself, okay, in other words, so you throw away the words and you take new words, which means that the words themselves are not attached, that you can't amputate them, you can't separate them from the idea. You can discard these words and enclose it with other words. Once you have it in words, you can throw away the first words and get new words. So the words are not immobile because they've separated and they become vessels for it. But initially, when the intellectual idea comes forth, it comes with letters. The letters are there. Now, this itself is already the concept that from the thickening of the light comes the vessels. Because the vessels are not called vessels until you can sense them and feel them in your head, right? The thickening of the light means, now why does the night have thickening? Because inside the light there are already letters. That's the thickening of the light. That's what creates the thickness. That's the density of the light. It's just when the light is too powerful, then the dense elements of the light are not felt. But as the light gets dimmer, the density of the light emerges more and it becomes these letters. However, how does the light to begin with have where does the thickening, where does these hidden letters come from? That is, now here's the important point that he wants to bring out in the Maamor, is that that's not really essential to the light. In other words, the light of Seichel, the revelation of an idea, the light itself, the concept itself does not have words. It immediately, when it flashes in our mind, it comes with words, but the words come from a different place. It's important to understand this. It's not that the intellect itself is wordy. The concept, an idea, a concept is not words. It's a light. It's an or sichli. It's an intellectual light. Whenever the light comes forth, it brings along with it, just like the soul has a power to produce intelligence, the soul has a production where it produces words. And when the intellect comes out, it must immediately grab words. It's almost like the intelligence has to go to a special locker room, pick up words, and through words it can make its way into the consciousness. It's not that the intellect itself is one with the letters. The letters come on its own. And what's the proof? The proof is the same proof that we were saying earlier. If every intellectual idea would essentially, if the words and the idea would be essentially one, then every person that would come up with the concept would have the exact same words. If two people explained the same concept, they would use the exact same words because the concept has these words. The fact that you could a lot of times have the same idea that was expressed, a few people, figured out the same thing, and each one said it in different words, is a sign, and it's the same concept, it's the same idea, it's just with different words, is a sign that the words are not part of the idea. The words are something else. So what happens? There is an oir, there's a power of intelligence, that's the light. It merges with words. The words now, but in the initial stage, the words are very hidden. But the reason why, and what happens, but when the words that are in the idea thicken, then these words become full-fledged words that become vessels. And that's the meaning, the thickening of the light becomes the vessels. What's the thickening of the light? The words, the hidden words that were in the light, that's the thickening of the light. The Hagbala, the limitations that were in the light. But the limitations of the light is not the light itself. The limitations of the light is something imparted, because whenever a intellectual idea moves into our consciousness, it must pass through the chamber of words. Let's look at it that way, easier way. Instead of it going to a locker room, we'll say like this. The exit of how to exit the pre-consciousness into consciousness is through a wardrobe closet. It has to go through words, and it picks up garments. Those words are the hidden thickness that's in the light. But when it emerges, the light dominates. As it goes a little further outward, the light dims the words thicken, the thickness of the light produces the vessels. Now let's take the same idea and apply it to the kav. The kav itself is like the light, the or the like the intelligence. That's the kav. It's an illumination. The words, the hidden words, are the imparted limitations that's there on the light of the kav that doesn't come from the light. It comes from the Reshimu. Remember we spoke about the Reshimu. So the Reshimu, that's the wardrobe of letters. Because Reshimu is the trace, is the power of Hagbala, the power of limitation. So when the light exits into the black hole, or enters into the black hole, it must go through the wardrobe of letters, which is the thickening element of the kav. It thickens the kav. It imparts hidden limitations, so to speak, on that kav, hidden letters. And eventually, as the kav will make its way through the entire order of evolution, these limitations imparted onto the kav by another source, by the Reshimu, will eventually become noticeable by becoming kalim. That's the idea that we were learning over here. The letters are not from the seichel itself. That's what we said earlier. If the letters are the intelligence itself, then every or seichel would have to come with special words. And we see it's not so. We see that three people can say the same idea. Everybody will use different words. The letters are not from the intellect. They come through the seichel. They come through the intelligence. From the thickening of the light, which is the limitation of it, which is not the limitation of it. The light itself should not be limited. Where is the limitation coming from? That's coming from the Reshimu, which is what imparts, so to speak, the limitations on it. This is how the vessels come about. But just like I'm sorry, I'm going a tiny bit over because it would be no point to give this whole class and not finish this thought. So even if we might make this class a little longer than always. But just like, let's go back to the letters. Just like the letters, although they don't come from the intellect, as we said earlier, the intelligence itself on its own doesn't have letters. Yet every emergence of an idea will always come along with letters that come from its own department in the soul. There is the department that shines the light of the intelligence, and there is another department where words come from, where letters come from. And the souls and the letters that are dressed onto the thing go together. But here's the thing. Those letters, these hidden letters in the soul, they don't reveal themselves unless there is an energy coming forth. These letters are not like you just have letters falling from your soul. The letters come out when you have an idea. That's when the words come with it. So the same is also, as we said earlier, and then from these hidden letters that came from this hidden, the source of letters that's in the soul, that was now revealed through the light, eventually these letters become full-fledged words, right? So let's apply that to the Reshimu and to the Kalim. We ask the question, doesn't the Kalim come from the Kav? We were trying to say the whole time that the vessels come from the Tzimtzum. They come from the Tzimtzum, from the Reshimu. But then we asked, but hold it. No, the Kav is what produces the Kalim. The Kav is what produces the vessels. Because without the Kav, there wouldn't be any vessels. And that's 100% true. That's the answer that he just answered. Of course, just like in our own experiences, the vessel, these letters do not fall out of nowhere. It's only when light emerges, these vessels will come along. You need a gilui, you need a revelation to reveal these hidden letters, because the letters themselves on their own, since they're all about constricting and defining, that means they're all about limitation. So they're very shy. They're not outward. They remain hidden because that's their nature. Their nature is more to conceal and to hide. So in order to bring out these letters that conceal and hide, you need a force of revelation. What's the force of a revelation? That's the intelligence. So the intelligence forces the letters out. In the same way, it's with the power of the Reshimu. The Reshimu itself and the Tzimtzum itself would never produce Kalim. although they're the power for kalim, and it's the power for that won't produce it. When there is kav, when kav emerges and it goes, and its entrance way is through the Reshimu, then what it will bring forth the letters that are the kalim that are really coming from the Reshimu, that are really coming from the. Okay, if this has not given you a headache, then just wait till we get to another further into the book. But don't give up. Bear with us. This is very deep and very special. As Hashem, let Mashiach be here today.